Welcome everyone back to Spoiler Warning featuring myself, Tom Colohue. This is of course where we talk wrestling news, and surprise, surprise, that's exactly what we're going to do today. We will be talking the CM Punk planned return in advance of Survivor Series Wargames. We're going to be talking Punk versus Gunter and when that match might happen. We're going to talk why Gunter versus Damian Priest seems most likely for Survivor Series at this point. We're going to do a little bit of personal news and intentions with the channel, and then rumours of Roman Reigns moving to Raw and where the WWE's focus currently is. We're going to talk Solo Sikoa future plans after the feud with Roman Reigns, a little bit about the Women's Mid-Card Championship, and then a little bit about William Regal and the WWE ID system. So strap in and do not go away. What I have really enjoyed recently is seeing quite a bit of what we're doing here popping up in other places. One thing I've really enjoyed is seeing people take clips from these shows and posting them on social media to their followings. I've seen quite a few times now when we've grown massively, primarily because someone's getting the word out, and I've seen it over the last few days as well. So thank you to anyone who has done that. We'll also keep up with the chat as best we can, so if you have questions, please drop them in and we'll answer them too. For example, we have plenty of people over on the YouTube side as we speak. Welcome everyone. Plenty of people on Twitch as well, and we're also live on Twitter once again, though I have been exploring a couple of other options which you guys may find interesting once we get to that point. Wow, Jay, so cruel and yet so correct. John says hello, Tom. Who do you think will be the first women's US champion? More on that shortly. Michael says hi, Tom. Hello, Michael. Sid says, who do you think will be the first women's US champion, and why is there not a women's IC title on Raw? More on that shortly. The Rabbit says, howdy everyone, hope everyone is good. Ed says, Colohue, been a while mate, been a while since we've heard that one. Amari says, hey Tom, welcome. Wrestler Fan says, Cody Rhodes going to compete at the Survivor Series. Cody Rhodes is going to be competing pretty much in every opportunity that there is. Plans do involve him competing at Survivor Series. Spiderboss says, hello Tom, there is people that would do anything for attention, and Jonathan Coachman, the amount of nonsense that the coach said is quite funny. Certainly most of what he said has been proven false, yes. Jay says, and I can't even say otherwise on this one, I'm setting the over-under at 3.5 for Tom burps. I'm taking the over. I do apologise. I get a bit gassy when I spend all my time talking. It means I'm basically sucking in a lot of excess air, and there's just not much I can do about it, so I try my best. Daniel says, what's up everyone? Welcome, Daniel. Declan says, hello Tom, have an awesome week. Thank you, Declan. Leon says, hi Tom, hope you're doing well. Doing very well, thank you. Spiderboss says, PWInsider tried to come up with the Julia Hart return news. I put you over on X with the Julia Hart news. I appreciate you, thank you kindly. Jordan says, good evening Tom, hope you're well sir. Doing very well, thank you Jordan, and thank you for joining us. I appreciate you Jay. I very much understand it's in jest. Juan says, hey Tom, according to SRS The Enemy, he reported AEW is not upset with NXT beating them last Wednesday. They're rather concerned with pleasing Warner Brothers officials. Cap or real? Bit of both. AEW officials are focused on achieving the best that they can with their own show. However, Tony Khan is known to want to beat WWE, and he's not succeeding in doing so. Unique Unicorn says hello. That's a new and interesting name. Welcome. John says, your thoughts on Jonathan Coachman saying Becky wanted $2 million from WWE. They turned it down, which is why she left. It's not true, even slightly. I addressed that on Friday's show. Angel says, WWE shop finally made a Liv Dom shirt. Liv Dom is money. And Declan says, watch the pig. We have 61 people on the YouTube, 19 likes, one more gets us to 20. Let's get that ball rolling. Plenty of people already popping on the X side, so let's get to our top story, which is as regards CM Punk and Survivor Series. The WWE were fully aware that CM Punk was not intending to make any sort of appearance at Saudi Arabia, and he has no intention of making any appearances in Saudi Arabia for the foreseeable future of the WWE. No intention whatsoever. It's one of the reasons we heard about a redoing of his deal just before he would have had to go there. When he originally signed his deal back at last year's Survivor Series, he in fact didn't have time to really negotiate a lot of the more careful pieces of news, such as the limited dates that he was looking for. That's now the in vogue thing, and of course not working Saudi. That renegotiation ended in his favour. CM Punk will be in attendance for Survivor Series. It looks like the top championship matches are not going to be CM Punk versus Gunter. It will instead be Gunter versus Damian Priest and Cody Rhodes versus Kevin Owens. Everything involving Randy Orton right now is building towards Cody Rhodes versus Kevin Owens. There are other opportunities for Punk to get the match, but he is expected to wrestle at Survivor Series as we begin to build towards what happens next. Personally, I do think we might see some combination of CM Punk versus Dominic Mysterio or CM Punk versus Finn Balor to lean into the Judgment Day aspect of it, now that we know that Judgment Day will not be working with the Wyatt Six. As usual, I do have to state that I do not believe for a moment that the Wyatt Six will appear at Survivor Series, but for CM Punk, I expect him back tonight, if not this week's show, next week's show, so tonight, and I would expect him to be crossing swords with Gunter relatively soon. What I'm being told is that while Punk vs Gunter was not really planned for Survivor Series, as I believe Viper Reports originally reported, Punk vs Gunter could still happen at Saturday Night Main Event as a WWE attempt to make that into a big deal pay-per-view. Getting involved with Judgment Day now certainly will help them to make that work. Okay, I'll catch you with the chat and then we'll get to our next piece of news. Noob says, hello Mr. Colohue, how are you doing today? Doing very well, thank you, Noob. Everton says, hello Tom, who do you expect Drew to feud with next and how come WWE Raw is pre-taped? A couple of different reasons for this. As regards to pre-taping, WWE have intentionally cut back on live shows as we head into the end of the year. They're trying to ensure that their end of year figures are particularly good, and given that they're not earning too much money for a overrun of a contract that they didn't really want to have to make, they are attempting to cut corners and save on costs by taping back to back. As regards Drew McIntyre, personally, I expect him to be away a little longer. There is something going around that he's going to be part of War Games. I'm not aware of that. I did report this time last year that he was going to be part of War Games, and a lot of people were very surprised and did not believe me. They were, of course, wrong. But I've not heard anything about Drew McIntyre being involved in War Games this year. Nothing at all. Personally, my expectation is that he stays away for a little longer, and then we see him pop back up around Royal Rumble time as we begin to build towards WrestleMania, Gunter being challenged and defeated by Drew McIntyre. Wrestler fan says, when do you think The Rock wrestles next? I think he'll wrestle on a random Raw in the build-up to WrestleMania. I think it'll be somewhere between the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania. We'll see The Rock popping up a lot more on WWE Raw and of course on SmackDown, and I think we'll see him wrestle on one of those shows kind of randomly to try and pop a rating in the build to WrestleMania. I kind of expect it will be Rock versus Jey Uso. Khalid says, hey Tom mate, enjoy your streams, keep up the great work. Thank you Khalid, appreciate you. Rizal says, was really surprised about the women's US title being announced. Was it always a plan to do it now? The timing is interesting. It wasn't always a plan to do it now, as we've seen so many times now. When it comes to the women's midcard championships, they are kind of making it up as they go along, and I'm sure you'll have already seen people taking their victory laps when they guessed for several months. Everton says Punk versus Balor, gets very excited. Shargain says, happy Monday Tom, if I started wrestling training today, do you have the chance to get signed to the WWE before Ricky starts? His contract seems unusually long. Yeah, a lot of injury time added, a lot of injury time. Backwards says, I think they're going to drag out Orton versus Owens till WrestleMania. I agree. In fact, I believe I pitched Orton versus Owens at the WrestleMania match card predictions I made just after SummerSlam. Unique says, who wins the first US Women's Championship? I think Naomi or Chelsea, or I would love to see Bayley, but pretty sure it won't happen. I don't expect Bayley to be competing. She has bigger fish to fry, essentially. I do think Naomi is a perfect person to win it. Spider-Ball says, at the end of last SmackDown, before the show went off the air, Roman told Solo, get your fifth member. Do you think the Bloodline Wargame match will still be 4 versus 4? Yes. I've originally reported it was going to be 4v4 just before SummerSlam. Dave Meltzer has confirmed since in the last couple of weeks. No Name just thinks Bushwhacker Luke should headline WrestleMania. And you know what? I'd be down. Sean says Tegan Knox under Nixon Newell will be returned to Attack Pro Wrestling on December 14th and 15th. How can she appear if she is under a non-compete clause? She's under a non-compete clause, which means she can't wrestle. The Rabbit says, I'd love to see Punk versus Finn. Declan says, how are they crowning a new Women's United States champion? That will all become apparent during tonight's Raw. Juan says, hey Tom, I know you already reported on the Montez Ford situation, but last Friday in an interview he sounded angry about his booking, to the point people think it's a work or a heel turn. I doubt he would be so openly breaking ranks if it wasn't a work. However, what I will say, if you as a WWE wrestler want to get attention, it's kind of up to you to make it happen now. Jerry on X says, what is your favourite match from any company in 2024? Mine is Bryan Danielson versus Will Ospreay. Okay, Now, I am a sucker for the WrestleMania main event. I think that was absolutely fantastic. I also think Gunter's been in an incredible number of fantastic matches as well. The Royal Rumbles are usually, are usually quite fun, but it's not something that really comes down to match of the year. It's hard to pick something that really stands out in that way. Certainly anything with Solo Sikoa has not achieved that either. So I'm not sure. I would say WrestleMania main event. Angel says, Tom, Slice Wrestling, they're still a thing? Like, they only ever guessed. Put on Patreon today, WWE's big mania plans for Randy. He'll return at the Rumble. Though all of this leads to a big feud with Cody later on. Any truth to this? I suspect Slice Wrestling might be watching. Spoiler warning. Spiderboss says, do you think Liv and Raquel could win the women's tag team titles tonight? Yes. He also says, Tom, I don't know if you noticed, but Becky Lynch will be featured at the Vulture Festival this Sunday. Yes, indeed. And I do expect her future to be sort of revealed in that point. 77 people watching on YouTube, only 25 likes, less than a third. Let's keep that going. Mr. Sims says, what would your wrestling name be? Mine would be Smokey Joe. I think my wrestling name would be Tom Colohue, because as a known wrestling journalist, I'd be a pretty effective heel right out the gate. Spiderboss says WWE struggled booking the women's tag team titles for the last 5 years. Now, as they've added a new women's midcard title, let's hope that WWE books well the USA women's title. Mary is hoping for Randy versus Cody at Mania, with Randy winning. Cody versus The Rock is still, to my knowledge, the plan. Wrestler fans says that we're going to get a women's Wargames or even a 5-on-5 elimination match. We're not going to get an elimination match. As regards a women's match, there was a plan to do so when Rhea Ripley was going to be involved in it. Backward says, I was very surprised about the women's US title. Really hope it doesn't end up like the women's tag team titles, as they have lost a lot of steam and focus over the years. Very true. Blue says, hi Tom, just wanted to stop in and point out I guessed Sami Uso's return before everyone. You in no way did, because I've been reporting that Sami Zayn would be a part of the Bloodline Wargames match since August. So I won't go that far, mate. Everton says, do you expect Wyatt 6 tonight? Some of them. Spiderboss says, I'd love to see CM Punk versus Dominic. It would be fun to see CM Punk roast Dominic on TV. Diva Mike says, you know what sounds better than Punk Dominic? Punk versus Finn. Everton says, which pay-per-view do you expect to see Rock versus Jey Uso? I don't. I did detail that I did not expect it to be a pay-per-view. Death Metal Lad says, good evening, Tom. Good evening to you too. Welcome. The Rabbit says, what do you see Logan Paul doing at Mania? At current, he's not signed to a WWE deal, so they'll need to update his deal first before they can commit to anything. Sean says, Cody Rhodes via Flagrant confirmed The Rock and Triple H made the pivot to him winning at Mania 40. Yep, which is what I've already been reporting, so I appreciate Cody Rhodes confirming what I've been saying. This guy says, do you see women like Mia Yim, Zelina, Blair Davenport and Laya Valkyria and others getting a push, or at least a legit mid-card storyline now they're the mid-card championship? No, I see the women's division being exactly the same. Like, I see no difference whatsoever. Blue says, my favourite match of the year is Gunter Sammy from Mania. Ooh, good shout. Good shout. Must have been Blue. I can't remember when that was, but it absolutely must have been. I got it when I got it. Blue, you're not wrong. That's pretty much what The Rock is doing, wrestling once a year. Everton says, what's Jacobs Fatu's plan for Mania if Solo is working Roman? To stand next to the ring while Solo wrestles Roman. Pretty much it. Bailey says, how far in the future does Jacob Fatu take over as the lead in the heel bloodline? Long time, but we have a bit of news on that one. Sean says, India Hartwell, via her YouTube channel, her release was unexpected, didn't cross her mind, but she took it like a champ. To be fair, what other choice did she have? Everton says, do you expect Gunter to hold the world title for more than 666 days? No, not personally. And Spiderboss says, looking at Liv's title reign makes me miss good heel champions such as Charlotte and Alexa Bliss. Next up, we're going to talk about Damian Priest, because Damian Priest versus Gunter has now been locked in, and the WWE making that one happen. It seems likely that this will take place at Survivor Series, buying more time for CM Punk to wait and build. Now, this match was originally reported to be part of plans for Saturday night main event. This, however, was reported by Dave Meltzer, and to my knowledge, the entirety of the plan was that Damian Priest would get the rematch of Gunter at Survivor Series, the CM Punk, as reported by Viper Reports, The report from Viper Reports was that CM Punk would face Gunter. That was not the plan and not the intention. It was very much going to be the Damian Priest rematch because with that extra viewership, Damian Priest looks more like a star. CM Punk is more than happy to be a bit lower down the card, especially given that he had a lot of focus when it came to his feud with Drew McIntyre. Eric says, good evening, Tom. How are you doing? Person who's taken the victory lap about the women's secondary championships is me. Oh, there's always one. Chris says, I think Bayley should be the first ever women's United States champion. And Everton says, I love you solo. I love me myself as well. Wrestler fan says, who do you see John Cena facing at WrestleMania? Probably someone a little further down the card. Personally, I'd go Braun Breaker. Blue says, Tom, are these releases cuts? Or are they letting contracts run down? Both suck, but one feels a lot less cruel. It's a bit of both. Baron Corbin, for example, ran his contract down. The WWE actually didn't want to let him go, but they also weren't willing to give him anything particularly fun. As regards Indy Hartwell, yeah, that was a firing. Everton says, if you could be a manager to any WWE superstar, who would you choose? There are many people who do not need managers. So I would want to pick someone who does potentially benefit from having a manager in their corner. I would have gone with someone like a Ronda Rousey, personally. I could make magic with that. Spider-Boss says, do you think Liv versus Io will take place at Survivor Series or on Raw? I think that would be a good Survivor Series match. Sid said, the stream is going perfect on YouTube. Thank you, Sid. And Sean says, you have a guess on what Becky will say her future is? I have no guesses. After all, I've reported more than anyone the details as regards what's happening with Becky Lynch. Chris says, I thought Punk vs McIntyre Hell in a Cell, also a good match. I wouldn't call it a great one. Throwaway says, Braun versus John IC title at Mania. That's where I'd go, yes. Blue says, I really do think it's weird to have a mid-card title that goes between shows. Feel more like world title than the two world titles. I mean, that's where we have the tag team championships. Chris says, I'm just happy that Bayley's not going anywhere anytime soon. She has no intention of doing so. She signed a new long-term contract for a considerable increase in money quite recently. Little bit of personal news and conversation about what's going on with this here channel. As you will know, on the YouTube side, I'm putting a bit less focus now that we have got to the 1 million views. It's why you can now watch on X. You don't have to actually go over to YouTube in order to watch. Also, long term, I'm looking at relaunching my Facebook page, which had been largely forgotten, but Facebook at the moment are desperately looking for content, and I'm told they're willing to pay for it. So, what can I say? I'm interested. My shorts, what I've been doing with the shorts lately on YouTube, you may know I've calmed that down. The main reason for that is, again, diversifying content. What I've been doing with shorts will be moving to TikTok. If you're a fan of the shorts, pop on over to TikTok. You should find content popping up there shortly. If you're looking for more from Twitter, you'll notice I've changed my style a little bit and become a lot more responsive. So if you have questions, by all means ask them on Twitter and I'll be sure to engage. But when it comes to Twitter at the moment, I can't help but notice that everyone's leaving for Blue Sky. Threads has not been a success. It simply hasn't. And unfortunately, Instagram is not an arena in which I've ever fully connected. So what I'd like to do is essentially start thinking in Blue Sky thinking. I think it's time for a reboot. And while I'm planning to keep the Twitter in order to use it more for advertising and engaging with the people there, logically, it is time to start diversifying what I'm doing. And over the next couple of months, really work out what my future is in this content world. I've spoken to you about a different style of long form video, which will be the focus on YouTube. We'll also, of course, continue to be doing YouTube lives. But at the moment, I am starting to think about a few different platforms because let's say there's a problem on YouTube. I've seen enough over social media suggesting that at times channels get shut down, and I'd like to be prepared for that as a possibility. So, follow on YouTube, follow on TikTok, follow on Twitter, and over the next few days, I'll be signing up to Blue Sky and starting again, because I do feel in the more than 10 years that I've been covering wrestling and that I've been on Twitter, I've unfortunately picked up a lot of accounts that follow me that don't really engage. So I'm going to try and move as many people over as possible, get a bit of momentum behind me, and then start advertising the different platforms that I use. So that's a bit of personal news about what we're doing at the moment. It's why this show is currently live on Twitter, because hey, if it takes off on Twitter, maybe that's the future. But for right now, my plan is to explore lots of options and see which ones really work for me. That includes starting to do these lives on TikTok, on YouTube Shorts, and indeed on Facebook. So if you've got Facebook, search for the Tom Colohue page and be sure to check it out. Let's catch up with the chat before we go to our next piece of news. Everton says, I think Chelsea Green should win the Women's US Championship, which I think is a good shout. She's done good work recently. Blue says, Punk Gunter a possibility for Saturday night main event? Indeed. Daz says, big up Tom, who's next for Seth? Do you know? I can't be certain that the feud is over at the moment, but what I will say is that CM Punk versus Seth Rollins is a plan for WrestleMania. So Everton, I know what you were saying there was a rematch with Bronson Daz, but what you said is it's a rematch with Bronson's dad, which I find hilarious. Sean says, do you think Julia wins the Women's Iron Survivor Challenge to get the rematch with Roxanne at New Year's Evil and win, so Roxanne can be called up after Rumble or Mania? No, personally, knowing that Julia versus Roxanne has already happened one-on-one, I think Stephanie Vaca versus Roxanne is up next. Spider-Boss says, do you know how WWE higher-ups feel about Liv Morgan's title reign? Thrilled of it. Very happy. Blue says, Blue Sky's enough like Twitter, so I get why it's taken off more than Threads. I did sign up to Threads. I did give it a shot. I don't understand how people grow there. I don't get how you grow. But it does seem like at the moment, most social media has a couple of different things. You either have a social media that just, the algorithm is based on showing you things that you aren't necessarily interested in. So that's TikTok, that's Twitter, that's YouTube Shorts. Just basically throw everything at you and hope something sticks. Then you've got the other side, which is YouTube Live. It's Blue Sky, it's Facebook, which only show you things that you've already chosen. So what you have to do is go onto these platforms which just throw your face at everyone in the hope that it sticks, and then convince people to go onto the platforms where there's actually value in having people stick around. What I need to find, if I'm going to commit to YouTube, for example, which I'm still very much planning to have it as my main base, is I need to find ways to funnel people here, to YouTube. If, for example, X really takes off, then I need to find a way to funnel people to X. And unfortunately, a platform like Blue Sky, a platform like Instagram doesn't do that. So it's a difficult one. I need to work out the best way to grow, because every time I try and research the best way to grow on social media, all I hear is, make good content. I feel like I do. But I do think the logical next step is cutting up spoiler warning and making constant news shows. So maybe the morning news video that I've mentioned before is a right move for this one. Anyway, Everton says, will we see any Bloodline segments tonight? I mean, we could. Mary says, hope if it is Cody and The Rock, that The Rock will not get that title. Not the plan to my knowledge. Declan says, I love your journalism. Thank you, Declan. And Age Carl says, Ty Tom and chat. Sean supports Michin for Women's United States Champion. Backward says, when do you see Cody Roman 3 happening? I'm surprised it hasn't already, to be fair, but with them both with faces, I don't see it happening at any point now. Sparrow says, I miss hearing the It's Chelsea Green on Chelsea Green's entrance. Everton says, do you expect a trilogy match between both bloodlines? And I'm guessing it'll be 1-1 after Wargames. No. HCar says, any news on any more Survivor Series matches? Not at this point. Liv Morgan versus EO seems like to land there. Cody Rhodes versus Kevin Owens, but that's all I've really got at the moment. Guy says, who's your favourite tag team? Mine is the Outrunners. Difficult to say. I really like the Street Profits. What can I say? Unique says, you make amazing content as referred to your channel by Wrestling Days. Thank you, Unique. I appreciate that. It's one of the reasons as well I'd like to keep Twitter, because I see plenty of people linking Wrestling Days to what I'm doing, and I know that I've popped up quite a bit in some of his videos, which is wonderful, and I very much appreciate him doing so. If I can provide him with news and content worth sharing, that will only help him make content as well. So it's a beneficial symbiotic relationship. Blue says, Tom, your issue is you actually want to report news and not be super controversial. I can't do controversy. Even if I tried. I don't care enough. I don't commit to hate. It takes too much effort. Bailey says, any update on Carmella's return? She's ready. My expectation is Royal Rumble. Declan wants Lyra as the first United States champion. Mary says, some say that The Rock will beat Cody and Rock and Roman will have a match for the title. What is your opinion? That won't happen. John says, Zarya pinned Roxanne in NXT this week also, so we could get Roxanne versus Stephanie versus Zarya. I think we'll get Roxanne versus Stephanie first, then Roxanne versus Zarya, because I do think eventually we're going to get Stephanie versus Julia. I mean, why not? Kai, I have no idea who you're talking about. Declan's favourite tag team is the Iconics. Charles Gaines says, have you heard anything about RVD having a match in NXT against Wesley? Nope. Dave, I've been asked this pretty much constantly. To be clear, I can't just go to people and say, hey, get me on your podcast. I'd certainly be open to it. If that's something you want to make happen, make it happen. Spider-Boss says, everything has been so easy for Liv Morgan during her title reign. Recently, last week, Adam Pearce stood up against Liv's shenanigans. Everton says, do you expect Randy to cost Owens versus Rhodes? Yes and no. Bismo says, good evening, Tom. Missed the past 2 Raw and SmackDowns. I feel like I missed a month of news from you. It does feel that way, doesn't it? We bombard you guys with a lot here. 85 people currently on YouTube, 38 likes, 2 more to 40. Let's get that going. 66 says, do we get the women's IC champion, or have we already talked about it? Not yet, but it's coming. Noob says, do you expect Asuka returning at the Royal Rumble in February, and do you see getting booked better under Triple H? Yes and yes. I expect lots of returns at the Royal Rumble. Roman Reigns seems set for a move to Raw, particularly after the WrestleMania season. Now, at the moment, the plan essentially is to kick him out of the Bloodline so firmly that he has to essentially become a brand new character, removing the heel cred that naturally comes with the Bloodline as well, and leaving it wide open for Solo Sikoa to take over and start his story with Jacob Fatu. Solo Sikoa is expected to win against Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. That at the moment is still the plan, though Jacob Fatu's name has naturally been mentioned a few times now, given his popularity. But what I will say in the build to this, Netflix are looking to get Roman Reigns full-time, and they will have him full-time internationally. When it comes to Monday nights, they want everyone. They want all the big names, and it's one of the reasons that Triple H is considering getting rid of the brand split. Roman Reigns, I'm told, will not be exclusive to anywhere. As of right now, one of the reasons we're seeing shows taped and recorded is that WWE is focused entirely on making a good deal for Netflix. That is considered to be their primary partner, and it is believed by the belief in the WWE that we will eventually see a second deal and the WWE staying with Netflix for decades to come. The money only increasing as it puts them in front of more eyes. The WWE are entirely focused on Netflix, and over the next couple of months, they don't really care too much about ratings for channels that they're not planning to stay on. Everton says, who do you expect to face Braun next? I think there's some good options there. There's a couple of people who could pop up, though it'll be someone lower down the card for me to get involved. I think someone like Karrion Kross would be very good. Blue says, Rox has now been pinned by Vaca and Zarya. They're definitely setting up something. Spider-Boss says, what happened? First Finn Balor getting kicked out of the Judgment Day or Liv losing her title? Liv losing her title. HCast says, any news on when Braun Strowman is back from injury? No, not at this point. Unfortunately, the injuries are starting to mount up. Jan says, I see the women's Royal Rumble match of Royal Rumble 2025 in the main event. I don't, because Roman will likely be in the men's one. Chris says they get Cora, Jade and Wesley to win the Iron Survivor Challenge qualifier matches tomorrow on NXT. Neve says they get the feeling Roman Reigns is going to get the Landlord character from 2K24. I mean, like the cover. 6 says Solo's not ready at all, but Jacob too good. People were saying that about Solo when he was in the Jacob role. Marcel says, do you think Cena wins the IC title in his last run and becomes a Grand Slam champion? No. Everton says, would you expect Jacob to face Roman anytime soon? Yes, but only if it's essentially a much lower card match. Spider-Boss says Naomi for the WWE Women's USA Champion. Sean says, any update on Shotzi? Not at this point in time. She's back in the fold, but she's not currently wrestling. HCAR says, any news on who's John Cena's opponent on WrestleMania? Nothing has been confirmed. Spider-Boss says, I'm surprised Bron Breakker hasn't appeared much on TV since Bron won back the IC title again. Ultimately, they did that just to get it off of Jay. Joe says, hey everyone. Welcome, Joe. Mr. Sim says, Natalia liked one of my posts on X and followed me back. Well done, you. And Michael says, my prediction is Charlotte or Becky will win the new women's title. It'll be someone who doesn't need to win. Certainly that does elevate the championship, though. After all, Seth Rollins did not need to win the World Heavyweight Championship. Right, what do we got left? The Women's Midcard Championship. I'm already seeing plenty of people having a victory lap over consistent guesswork that we see mid-card women's championships. This has been something that the WWE have been considering for a long time but have never been able to confirm. There is one on the way to Monday Night Raw, which we will likely see debut tonight, so by all means check that one out. We've just broken 100 viewers on YouTube. We still have only the 40 likes. Keep them rolling. If you're just joining us, please make sure to check if you've hit thumbs up. When it comes to the Women's United States Championship, they do want a tournament of some sort because the intention is to get as many women onto the shows as possible when both shows go to 3 hours. This will mean both shows having more opportunities, but the tournament will essentially provide opportunities for a small number of women and then it will largely move on to a very small focus. I do believe a more recognisable name will be winning the championship, which is why I personally think we're going to see Naomi instead of someone like Michin or Zelina Vega. And it's also why I do think at WrestleMania there's a couple of potential matches here that could work for it. We could have the United States Championship match featured in Jade Cargill versus Bianca Belair. Personally, what I would do is have Women's Intercontinental Champion Alexa Bliss defending against Nikki Cross. That's what I personally would go for. If you're new to this channel, please do remember to hit subscribe. It does mean you'll get a notification when we go live and you won't miss any of this news. Also, if you are a fan and you're enjoying what we're doing here, make sure you're following on Twitter, on TikTok, and if you search Facebook for Tom Colohue, you will indeed find me. So by all means check me out over there as I attempt to diversify content and find new ways of reaching people. The best way you can help is simply by making sure you're following on any social media that you already have. Just catching up, guys. Yeah, Everton says it'll be interesting to see how Owens reacts to Zayn being back in the Bloodline. I suspect tonight will be a good night to find out. Sean says, do you see John Cena appearing in TNA during his retirement tour? No. Mr. Sim says, do you think Charlotte Flair will be the first US champion? No. Blue says, basically the mid-card title exists to do what Triple H isn't willing to do, push more women who aren't world champion. Yeah, unfortunately, it's still down to Triple H though. Blue says there will be an IC title as well. They've been talking about for years having both a women's IC and a women's US championship, so I can't imagine they would do one without the other. Spider-Boss says, logically, Damage Control should win the women's tag team titles. WWE giving the women's tag team titles to Liv and Raquel. Mary says, unpopular opinion, but I hope to see Roman and Cody team up again. And HCAR says, any news on the Wyatt 6? Not at this point in time. Last I heard, they are still working out what the next steps will be, listening to Bo Dallas without necessarily being ruled by Bo Dallas. But there is a point now in which Bo Dallas has started writing the stories and not just sort of leaning on what Bray Wyatt was already intending to do. So they are trying to work out the next steps. There is still a long-term plan with multiple phases. Declan says, if Becky does come back, do we see her with more title opportunities? Of course she will have more title opportunities. She is Becky Lynch. John says, do you think Tegan or Indy could have benefited from the women's US title if they hadn't been released? Yes, though I do think Candice LeRae will benefit from the Women's United States Championship. Last piece of news I've got to share. William Regal is heavily involved in the scouting for the WWE ID system. He identified a number of different wrestlers who are developing at this point in time and working the indie circuit, and he is the one who's been in direct contact with wrestling schools to try and recruit their people. William Regal essentially identified many of these people for NXT Europe and is now taking the opportunity that NXT Europe is essentially dead in the water to get them signed, but also not really. Related but unrelated, NXT Europe has essentially been abandoned at this point in time. No progress has been made for a number of years, and the WWE are not said to be enamoured of the idea of dedicating more time and effort to something that they do not believe will be profitable. Blue says, I agree it's all on Triple H, but it feels like titles work as shorthand for him, even if the booking isn't great. If that's true, we'd probably have seen a lot more of the women's tag team titles than we have. Everton says, do you expect Xavier to turn on Kofi at their 10-year celebration? Certainly it's got a festival of friendship feel about it. Shaw again says, are the WWE higher-ups more pleased with Jade Cargill's work than they were a few months back? Yes, but also they definitely expected more. Sid says, do you see Becky Lynch returning as a babyface or a heel? Babyface all the way. Hector says, evening Tom, with the women's US title, do you think the title will actually be more featured than how the tag titles have historically been, because it would be a shame if we saw the same thing? I suspect we're going to see the same thing. Sean says, Data Steele was one of the signings for WWID. She was indeed. And Bailey says, will NXT ever tour in Europe? At this point, no. Spiderboss says, does WWE still want NXT Asia? At this point, no. Everton says, what's more likely, WrestleMania Saudi or London? Saudi, because they'll pay more money. Unique says, I find it interesting Liv has mentioned at least twice she retired Becky. She has, and I do sort of expect Becky versus Liv in some capacity at WrestleMania, though I do think Rhea Ripley will also be involved. And Declan says, I could see Rhea and Becky teasing Liv that she's not a Grand Slam champion. That would be shaming a lot of people in that locker room, and I don't think it would really be fitting of the characters. Jerry says, what has happened to Ruby in AEW? Gave birth, mate. Chris says, Zeta Steele versus Roxanne Perez, a match that he's excited for. HCar says, Tom, what's more likely at a pay-per-view at UK or somewhere in Europe? Both. We will be getting both in 2025. Multiple times for the Europe one. Right, we've been live for 37 minutes. We've run through all of the news, and I do think we have got through everything I wanted to cover. We'll be back on Friday, though I am looking at a video for Wednesday to try and reboot the YouTube algorithm to recognizing that I'm going to be doing long form again. So by all means, check that out. Remember to follow on all social media platforms to make sure you are staying informed. I will be setting up Blue Sky shortly. In the meantime, though, I've been Tom Colohue. You have been fantastic, and I'll see you all very soon.